China's third quarter GDP growth is 4.9% this year, but the first three quarters together registered 9.8% increase year on year. Chinese authorities attribute the slowdown mainly to COVID-19, floods in North China, and the complex international environment. Against a widespread energy crunch in the European Union, the UK, and elsewhere, how much constraint has energy put on the Chinese economy, and what accounts for this power shortage? Will the short-term measures affect the global plans to switch to clean energy? Joining us today for the discussion from Singapore is Dr. Philip Andrew Speed, Senior Principal Fellow at the Energy Studies Institute of the National University of Singapore, and from Guangzhou in southern China, Professor Qi Ye, Director of the Institute for Public Policy at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, who is also a professor at the School of Public Policy and Management of Tsinghua University. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So there seems to be some alarm-mongering about how an energy crunch has hit China's economy. Some media were already saying that the Chinese economic model is broken and China's GDP will fall far below the growth forecast by the World Bank in June, which was over 8%. Just an hour ago, China revealed that for the first 9 months of this year, the GDP expanded by 9.8%, although the third quarter GDP grew by only 4.9%. And some media have quickly called it disappointing and attributed that to property and energy sectors. Dr. Philip, are you alarmed by the news?
Good morning, Lucian. No, I'm not alarmed. I think the figure might be a surprise, but I think we were expecting a slowdown. And obviously the third quarter of last year was very rapid growth. So the 4.9% year on year shouldn't be a big surprise given multiple interruptions in supply chains as well as the short-term energy crisis. So yeah, for those who watch China closely, it should not be a big surprise.
Professor Qi, how do you look at China's latest GDP numbers? In late September, for instance, the power squeeze compelled certain provinces in China to limit factory operation hours and cap power usage. How much of the lower GDP is due to energy, in your opinion?
I think it is an adjustment because, as we know, the first two quarters and actually earlier before that, the demand for manufacturing goods for export has been growing very, very fast, and that also caused the demand for energy consumption. We see in the first half of this year there is a double-digit growth in energy, and I think the third quarter is a basic. I mean, from the energy sector perspective, is the adjustment, and because the system, the electric power system, cannot really sustain such a major increase of the demand for power, for electric power.
Let's take a look at the energy situation. Dr. Philip, in Europe, we know natural gas prices have jumped 6 times over last year's prices. Some British companies say they could be forced to close factories or pass the rising cost to consumers, and U.S. crude oil prices also topped $80 a barrel, the highest since 2014, plus what we're seeing in China. So what is causing the power situation in China? Is it isolated or part of a wider, even global crunch?
I think everybody's suffering an energy crisis, or maybe a major crisis or minor interruption for slightly different reasons. But the overall background is the economic recovery from the pandemic and the fact that the suppliers of energy and the supply chains have not kept pace with demand. China has some peculiarities which we can talk about, but if you come to Europe, you've got a long winter, and then it's hot summers, too much electricity demand, not enough gas storage, and then we're expecting winter, so prices are going up. And it's the same everywhere, whether you're looking at oil, OPEC haven't increased their production, whether it's coal mines in China have not increased their production. So everywhere there's a sort of a disconnect between supply and demand that will work itself through, but we may be in for a difficult winter.
In China, Professor Qi, electricity consumption grew over 16%, as you just mentioned, in the first quarter of this year, and industrial power use also increased by roughly the same percentage. Why such a dramatic increase specifically this year, and how much has COVID-19 or the floods in northern China, especially Shanxi province, which has been a traditionally big coal-producing province, how much has all of that contributed to the situation we're seeing now?
I think it's mainly economic. It's, as we mentioned, it's due to this very rapid increase in demand for manufacturing goods. And as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected every country, every corner of the world, and has major impact on the supply chain. And China was the first major economy that recovered quickly. And therefore, the demand for the goods from China has been growing so fast, and it's so fast that we have seen a huge price hike in shipping containers. And there is I think that's basically explains the major increase, the double-digit increase in power demand. In supply side, what you just mentioned, the flood in Zhengzhou, the flood in Shanxi, that is especially in Shanxi, that's pretty late in the. I don't really think that contributed a lot. Well, maybe in the future, but this round of price hike in coal, and that's probably not a major factor. I think it's mainly economic, and it's a transitional and it's temporary. I don't think it will last for long.
Staying with Professor Qi, China said it is making efforts to increase coal production and supply. China's coal imports surged by 3/4 in September. So what other measures is China taking, and could these measures ensure power supply as winter approaches? Professor Qi.
Well, first of all, your data on the import of coal may be accurate, but it's a bit misleading because we know China's coal consumption relies mostly, if not entirely, on the domestic production in China, and the coal import in the last couple of years has decreased so much, especially in last year, and therefore a major increase in import is not a very good predictor of how China's coal consumption relies on international sources. I think increasing the supply from domestic sources is really the major measure, and we have to also realize this is in my view is mostly preventive, because we are going to enter the winter and we need the heating, especially in the northern part of China. And I think that is the main reason. I think it is of concern, but I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Dr. Philip, last week China announced an improved pricing mechanism for coal-fired power, saying it would allow coal-fired power prices to fluctuate more greatly by up to 20% from base levels. That's an increase on previous limits. But the reform doesn't touch electricity consumption for residents and agriculture. How do you look at these measures? Will these measures ensure that suppliers don't lose money, and neither do people pay through their nose?
Yeah, I don't think a 20% increase is going to make a huge difference because the coal price has doubled. So 20% is nice, but I think many provinces are making their own arrangements, and there are new deals being done between power stations and big users. And I think this is one of the major problems over the last year or so, is that the government has tried to keep down electricity prices at the same time as coal prices have gone up. So the power stations have not been buying coal, so the stocks at power stations are low, and if they have the coal, they don't want to produce electricity because they're losing money. So I think this is a sort of reminder to the government that the current system of pricing is not working very well.
Professor Qi, what is your answer to similar questions, the effectiveness of greater fluctuation of the pricing system? Yeah.
I basically agree with a little bit different take on this question because this fluctuation 20% certainly helps, but it will help in the longer term. This market reform of the electricity price has long overdue, and it has been in the discussion for more than 1.5 decades, almost two decades now. So the longer term, I think this is the direction to go. Perhaps the also important is thinking about for other players. This electricity system is highly regulated by the state, and other players are very hard to get in. I think together with the price reform, we'll also need to consider to allow other players, non-state players, to get into the system. Otherwise, and we will probably endure such a problem for even longer.
Time very limited. We won't be able to get deeper into that detail. I do want to touch upon the balance between energy economy and climate change, because this is huge on the agenda. And in 2016, China held back on building new coal-fired plants to lower the proportion of coal and increase clean energy production in the overall picture. Dr. Philip, with the government increasing coal production and imports to tide over the current shortage, will it affect the commitment for China to peak carbon emissions before 2030 and to reach carbon neutrality before 2060?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this is a short-term problem. As Professor Qi says, during the winter or by next spring, this will be all sorted out so they can get back to the trajectory that they were planning. And I think most people are expecting China's emissions to peak before 2030. That shouldn't be too difficult. 2060, that's another challenge. Let's wait and see.
Professor Qi, your take?
Absolutely. 2060 is a much bigger challenge. And before 2030 is highly expected. And we have to realize that this is a short-term thing. And what also important is the proportion, the share of coal consumption has been in steady decline. Just despite what we see this year, I think it's very, very much a short-term. And I think overall we will expect a further decrease of the share of coal in the overall primary energy supply.
Finally,
primary energy consumption, right?
Right. Finally, at the recent COP15 in Kunming in southwestern China, President Xi Jinping announced that a massive clean energy project that will produce 100 million kilowatt, and that project is under construction. But there are some concerns about renewable energy due to nature's erratic behavior. For example, experts say Britain's energy woes stemmed from a windless summer that slashed renewable energy production by 24%. Dr. Philip, can renewable energy be the solution to a world of rapid climate change?
It certainly can play a very big part. It has to be backed up by storage and transmission grids. Whether we can have a world with totally renewable energy in the next 30 or 40 years is unlikely, and I think. But I think the message from, as it were, the UK and the other parts of the world is the climate is changing. So whether it's solar or wind or hydro, you cannot expect the quantity of energy to be the same as it was over the last 10 years. It may be bigger, it may be less. So climate change itself is affecting the usefulness of renewable energy positively and negatively in different parts of the world.
We're going to leave it there. Many thanks to Dr. Philip Andrew Speed joining us from Singapore and Professor Qi joining us from southern China.